Goodbye to Led Zeppelin for the time being. Lo siento, mi gente. But it is another live session of Conchas y Café. Thank you for joining in, those of you that are here. Aquí en el chat de Zoom les estoy subiendo el folleto de hoy. Tonight's handout is available for you to download right now in the chat. Of course, we'll be following it along, so you don't have to download it, but it's always good to have the handout for when you want to follow along. And for everybody on our live streams, I am, of course, keeping track of all of the chats. So if you have any questions at any time, you're more than welcome to use the chat, whether that be on YouTube Live, Instagram Live, and of course, for those of you here in the Zoom session. Just make sure that everything is visible for everybody. Okay. So, yeah, again, welcome everybody to another session of Conchas y Café. Tonight, I'll be the one leading the lesson, but of course, Abraham is always welcome to jump in and add his 2 cents, as well as all of you in the Zoom session now. Y para empezar, pues aquí tenemos, como ven, una cita que viene de nuestro amigo Eduardo Galeano. Para los que me conocen, saben que a mí me encanta el trabajo de Eduardo Galeano. This quote actually comes specifically, for those of you that can see me on the Zoom, it comes from this particular book here, Las Palabras Andantes. And for our Instagram live people, this is the book that it's coming from. The quote, which I translated, roughly translates to window into the word, number 3. Y para los que no conocen a Eduardo Galeano, él nació el 3 de septiembre del año 1940, falleció el 13 de abril del 2015. Fue periodista, novelista y autor uruguayo. He's also typically known as like the godfather of football, soccer, or at least writing about it. He definitely was big in that area, in that arena. In English, the quote says, in the Guarani language, "Ñey" means word, and it also means soul. The Guarani people believe that those who lie against the word or squander it are traitors against the soul. Y en el español original se llama ventana sobre la palabra. Es como tipo prosa poética, digamos. Y dice, en la lengua guaraní, ñe significa palabra y también significa alma. Creen los indios guaraníes que quienes mienten la palabra o la dilapidan son traidores del alma. So, ¿cómo les parece esta cita de Eduardo Galeano? What is your initial thought upon reading or seeing this quote?
Me gustó que puso la palabra dilapidar.
Dilapidan?
La palabra,
Yeah.
así no he escuchado de esa forma.
Yeah, I like that too, it's a very effective use of language, no? Since it is speaking about language. Los demás? Anyone else have any thoughts?
I just want to, I didn't raise my hand, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But, I was kind of thinking about, how I know my grandfather and más antes, la palabra valía más que un papel firmado,
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if you ever heard that before, but la persona que daba su palabra
Mhm.
sellaba, sellaban tratos, and to them, it was the word, their word, ¿cómo se dice? Decía mi abuelo, que el que daba su palabra valía mucho y que cumpliera también, claro. You reminded me of that, my
Mhm.
back in the time, your word was worth a lot.
Mhm.
You didn't have to sign documents, you didn't have to sign, like tratos, porque con like a handshake and your word, that was all that was needed. And people would respect that, the word, would respect the word.
Yeah,
That's what came to my mind.
yeah, it reminds me of the phrase palabra de honor, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that we put a lot of value on words, and it depends obviously culturally speaking, and that kind of thing, but um, to think about how we associate things like contracts or trust in the word, that I think is very important for us to always have in mind. Eric wrote in the chat, one's spoken word most of the time is or should be gospel. And yeah, I think that, that also speaks to the idea of the word is our bond, or the word is our honor. I live and die by my word. That those kinds of like phrases that exist because people really felt at some point that words had a meaning that went beyond just what they actually say, right? And maybe or maybe not, that might have changed over time. That's, I think, up for debate. But we, at least as poets and writers, it's really, really important that we consider, especially what he says here, that the Guarani people believe that those who lie against the word or squander it are traitors against the soul. And, that's, I think, to me, speaking more about the idea that we need to be very thorough and that we need to be very clear about the words that we use as writers. O sea, esto no es solo algo que se trata de la confianza que uno siente en otra gente, sino en la confianza que la gente tiene en nuestras palabras que usamos como poetas. We have to be selective, right? And the more selective we are, the better communicators we can be, but also I think the better storytellers we can be. Because after all, this is a creative writing class, no? But it does kind of go into even things like, or questions regarding our authenticity and our, you know, ability to come across with authority, no? Pero, ¿hay alguna otra opinión? Anyone else have any other thoughts or maybe disagrees with the sentiment of the what's it called? Of the quote? Yes, Abraham?
I think like the way he refers to the word as also the soul, because sometimes we see ourselves like humans, especially we maybe make gestures or things like that, or move or eat or do bodily things, right? But when we speak, it's definitely what's really in our minds, which is really from deep inside. So that kind of gives me a sense of like, yeah, it comes from like our soul, right? Like who we are, or what we want to say to the world and to the people around us. And they're saying basically to not fake that word because that's your soul you're trying to represent. And once you start changing or not doing what you're gonna say, things like that,
Mhm.
it definitely it loses its value. So you're losing your soul on the same time, right?
Yeah, I think that that's a very powerful thing to talk about, in the sense of like how we as people maybe measure our value based off of, whether or not we follow through on what we say. Igual como, pues, la frase que existe, la palabra vale oro, como mencionó Aurea en el chat, that is a very, I think, entrenched idea in a lot of cultures. There's also, like I said, changes over time that people kind of maybe are questioning the idea of what a word can mean or the value of a word. We've seen in the course of history like censorship and the way that people approach certain kinds of words, in different contexts. It's people might have taken a word that was like a racial slur, for example, and turned it into a word of empowerment among a particular community, or a gender slur, same thing. And there's ways in which we can define the weight of a word, as a community. But in the end, like I said, for us as writers and as poets especially, we really have to be careful with the words that we're using, because it's more about telling the story that is the story we want to tell in an effective way. And it's also about building worlds in other people's minds. That's, I think, what's really important. Ahora también dice en el chat, pero a veces era demasiado, no podían cambiar de idea y mucha gente sufría, ¿ya? Y como se cae con alguien y ya no puede romper el compromiso porque dio la palabra. Yeah, that too. You can get yourself in trouble with, se compromete uno a veces, ¿verdad? Con lo que uno dice. And that could be a problem. But again, going back to what we had been talking about, when with regards to writing, last lesson was all about metaphor and simile, right? Abraham gave us this excellent example of how metaphors can change the way that we think about a particular object, in the case of maybe the tree as an example, and how fire can be a metaphor for not just destruction, but also growth. You see, so in that way, we can almost assign a different understanding of a word when we're talking about the way we build metaphors. So to be clear about what we mean by building, y obviamente las palabras en inglés y en español no son exactas, ¿verdad? Todo tiene su definición dependiendo de la cultura de uno. Por eso aquí, bajo la definición en español, solo tengo aquí construir como verbo. Whereas in English, build can be not just a verb, but it can also be a noun. So there's a little bit of like fluidity, we'll call it, in English with the term build. Pero para no, I guess, aburrirlos tanto, aquí el verbo construir es similar al verbo build en inglés, ¿verdad? Es el organizar y unir materiales de manera gradual para formar una totalidad compuesta. And I kind of like how the sentiment of, the definition of building as a transitive verb implies that it's about bringing things together to create a whole. It's not melting them together, it's a composite whole, you see. And composite specifically talks about individual elements that each one of them contributes to a larger whole. Obviously, there's also the idea of increasing or enlarging when we talk about building in English. Y en español también un poco a veces se puede usar el verbo de construir como aumentar o engrandecer, y también como el tomar parte en la construcción. In the sense of English, it's also to engage in building or to move towards a peak, as in intensity. Um, in Spanish, you don't get that same sort of connotation of building. En español no típicamente decimos estoy construyendo la intensidad, ¿verdad? Se dice voy aumentando la intensidad. So, por ese lado, the connotation in Spanish is different from the connotation in English. But it is something to obviously keep in mind. Language itself can determine how we assign connotations or annotations to words. These are tools that we can use as poets. And then again, there's the noun version in English for the word build, que no existe en español. Construir no es, um, no se usa de manera así como en inglés, in the sense of building, right? Or build, like the structure of something, especially when it's talking about the body conformation of a person or an animal, right? That's a different sense of build. No decimos que yo tengo la construcción de I don't know, un cuerpo grande, ¿verdad? Ese uso de construcción o construir no existe en el español. So that's why we see here in the English that noun version of build. Any questions or thoughts on the differences between construir and build? If not, that's fine. Construct versus augment. Yeah. There's definitely a difference there, as River pointed out. And to build in the sense of like, augmenting would be like increasing or enlarging. That's where they are synonymous in some ways. Pero bueno, hay que hablar un poco sobre the idea of building or saying goodbye in the case of Octavio Paz's poem here. Goodbye to the house from Liberty Under Oath. Adiós a la casa viene de este libro aquí, si lo pueden ver. Se llama Libertad bajo palabra for our folks on Instagram Live. It comes from this book specifically, Libertad bajo palabra. And it's written by Octavio Paz. The poem itself, I believe, was written around 1934, if I remember right. So estaba bien joven todavía Octavio Paz cuando se escribió y se publicó por primera vez este poema. And as a young man, that might be reflected in the poem itself. I think it's good for us to know that as we read it, because if we were to think that, this poem was written later in his life, we might come away with a different interpretation of it. Ya especial porque aquí pueden ver que Octavio Paz nació el 31 de marzo en el año 1914 y falleció en el año 98. So it wasn't that long ago that Octavio Paz passed away. And if you think about his life from 1914 to 1998, he saw a lot of things get built and rebuilt and change. And I mean, as a poet and as a diplomat, I mean, it's, I think, a lot for a person to take in personally. Pero a ver, ¿hay algún voluntario que nos puede leer el poema? Or do I have to pick someone?
I can read, I don't know, English or Spanish.
Whichever.
Español?
How about we start with the English one and then we'll maybe give Aurea a chance to read the Spanish one?
Okay,
So go ahead, San Juanita, whenever you're ready.
okay. Goodbye to the house from Liberty Under Oath. It is the early morning. I want to say goodbye to this tiny world, only true world. Goodbye to the sad opening of eyes of the day that rises. Sleep flees bundled up from the scene of its crime, and the soul is an abandoned place. Goodbye to the chair where I nightly hung my suit, the daily lynching and the couch rock in my insomnia, crag that was neither split by lightning nor carved by water. Goodbye to the truthful mirror where I left my mask to descend into the depths of endlessness, and I never descended. You have no depths, only a surface. No, you have no depths, only a surface. Goodbye to the window's minimal sky and the fog that blindly climbs the foothill, pasture that fades away. To the cotton ball dress, the plum tree, say goodbye. And to that bird that is a bit of breeze in a branch, say goodbye to the river. Your waters always were, for me, the same waters. Girl, woman, ghost of the edge, forever tell you goodbye. Like how the river says it to the riverbank in a never-ending farewell. I would like to say goodbye to these present memories of morning, but I'm afraid they'll awaken and say goodbye to me.
Perfecto. Thank you, Santanita.
Yes, of course.
Y en el español, ahora, si nos hace el favor, si puede.
Sí, está bien. Adiós a la casa. De libertad bajo palabra, Octavio Paz. Es en la madrugada, quiero decir adiós a este pequeño mundo, único mundo verdadero. Adiós a este penoso abrir de los ojos, del día que se levanta. El sueño huye, embosado, del lugar de su crimen y el alma es una plaza abandonada. Adiós a la silla donde colgué mi traje cada noche, ahorcado cotidiano, y al sillón roca en mi insomnio, peña que no abrió el rayo, ni el agua agrietó. Adiós al espejo verídico donde dejé mi máscara, por descender al fondo del sinfín, y nunca descendí. No tienes fondo, solo superficie. Adiós al poco cielo de la ventana, y a la niebla que sube a ciegas la colina. Rebaño que se desvanece, al vestido de copos el ciruelo, decirle adiós y a ese pájaro, que es poco de brisa en una rama. Decirle adiós al río, tus aguas siempre fueron para mí las mismas aguas. Niña, mujer, fantasma de la orilla. Decirte siempre adiós, como el río se lo dice a la ribera, en un interminable despedida. Quisiera decir adiós a estas presencias, memorias de mañana, pero tengo miedo que despierten y me digan adiós.
Excelente. Gracias, Abea. So, first reactions. Is there anything that stood out to you as you heard or as you read the poem? ¿Hay alguna imagen que sí fue algo vívido en su mente? Can I scroll down a little bit? Sure. Ahora dice, el final fue interesante, relevador. ¿Cómo de qué manera, Aurea?
Do you want me to write it in the chat or do you want me to share it here?
You can share.
Yeah, because I feel like I'm the only one talking.
It's okay.
I don't want to take like, monopolize this. So, this is I get a feeling like this person wants to see like the end. Well, this is in my head, right? This
Mhm.
is the feeling I get, that wants to see the end, but at their own time. That's the way I sensed it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
I want to say goodbye and say goodbye, but I'm afraid,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
that it's gonna catch me. And it says, but I'm afraid they'll awaken and say goodbye to me. That's what I sense. And the reason I think about it is because sometimes, in the middle of my illness,
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to live anymore." I'm sorry, guys. I'm not suicidal or anything like that. Or at least I don't think I am. But of course, because I love God and I love life and all that.
Yeah.
But when I feel so sick, I start thinking that way. I start thinking, I am, yeah, yeah, I should just not be here anymore. And it brought that memory to me. And then I'm thinking, when I'm feeling well, I'm like, what was I thinking? What if, what if God says, okay, fine, let's go. But really, when I'm feeling well, I'm like, what was I thinking? So
Mhm.
it just reminded me of that it sounds like it's somebody that wants to, but at the end, says no. I don't want to say goodbye because I'm afraid that, it's going to happen and they'll say goodbye to me. That's what, I don't know if I make any sense.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, that and I think that you and Aurea might be thinking along the similar lines. Aurea wrote in the chat, revelador, que él tiene miedo de morir. Al
Ah,
fin, me
I'm
imagino.
so sorry. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that there is something there, right, to
Yeah.
this idea that, como dice al fin, que tiene miedo que despierten, all the things, all the memories of the morning, right, that they awaken and they leave or say goodbye to him. So there's I think a sense of fear that could be
Mhm.
building in this. Um, I would also say that there's another sense that he is describing that maybe we find in reading the entire poem. But I'll leave it at that. A ver quién capta lo que quiero decir. Also, River wrote in the chat que el vestido de copos, the cotton ball dress, this really grabbed their eye. Where is it? Al vestido de copos, el ciruelo, decirle adiós, y a ese pájaro que es un poco de brisa en una rama. To the cotton ball dress, the plum tree, say goodbye, and to that bird that is a bit of breeze in a branch. Yeah, I think that that's a really beautiful image. Is there anything else that caught people's attention? Eric wrote in the chat, I might be wrong, but it has a ode poem vibe to it, recalling memories they want to stay timeless. Yeah. That's I think also what I would get from this poem too. It does have the energy of an ode. This is like an ode to not just the house, right? It is about a house. It's goodbye to the house, clearly, but it's about more than just a house. And I think that there's a sense of almost like a nostalgia, a sense of being very aware of the things that make up this house, but going beyond just the idea of a house. Abraham?
Yeah, to me, it was more about. I think the only thing that gives me the sense of Morehouse, which is more the title, is more about life, or a stage of life at least.
Mhm.
And it's not as sad. It's more of a homage of the things he likes about it, or the things that he put attention towards. There's a lot of details that are not like major things in life. It's just like putting a coat on the hanger, which I like the way he put it on, like it's being hanged, right? Like
Mhm.
hanging over hanging. I
Mhm.
really like the image of it that we're talking about, you know? And it
Mhm.
has a couple of little of those ones. There's simple things, but the way he's putting it, it's like putting attention to the little things in life and saying, oh, these are the things I'm gonna miss, right?
Mhm.
But it's more of a appreciation of those little things.
Eso. Yeah, there's a sense of appreciation that I also get. There's a sense of hoping that things don't change, even though he's aware that they will change, ¿verdad? There is an awareness, I believe, that things will change. Let me read the poem for us one more time and see if anyone else catches anything. Para empezar, se los voy a leer en español. Adiós a la casa. Es en la madrugada. Quiero decir adiós a este pequeño mundo, único mundo verdadero. Adiós a este penoso abrir los ojos del día que se levanta. El sueño huye, embosado, del lugar de su crimen, y el alma es una plaza abandonada. Adiós a la silla, donde colgué mi traje cada noche, ahorcado cotidiano, y al sillón, roca en mi insomnio, peña que no abrió el rayo, ni el agua agrietó. Adiós al espejo verídico, donde dejé mi máscara por descender al fondo del sinfín, y nunca descendí. ¿No tienes fondo, solo superficie? Adiós al poco cielo de la ventana y a la niebla que sube a ciegas la colina, rebaño que se desvanece, al vestido de copos, de ciruelo, decirle adiós y a ese pájaro que es un poco de brisa en una rama, decirle adiós al río, tus aguas siempre fueron para mí las mismas aguas. Niña, mujer, fantasma de la orilla, decirte siempre adiós, como el río se lo dice a la ribera en una interminable despedida. Quisiera decir adiós a estas presencias, memorias de mañana, pero tengo miedo que despierten y me digan adiós. Y en inglés, one more time, goodbye to the house. It is the early morning. I want to say goodbye to this tiny world, only true world. Goodbye to the sad opening of eyes of the day that rises. Sleep flees, bundled up from the scene of its crime, and the soul is an abandoned place. Goodbye to the chair where I nightly hung my suit, the daily lynching, and the couch, rock in my insomnia. Crag that was never split by lightning nor carved by water. Goodbye to the truthful mirror where I left my mask to descend into the depths of endlessness. And I never descended. You have no depths, only a surface. Goodbye to the window's minimal sky and the fog that blindly climbs the foothill, pasture that fades away. To the cotton ball dress, the plum tree, say goodbye. And to that bird that is a bit of breeze in a branch, say goodbye to the river. Your waters always were, for me, the same waters. Girl, woman, ghost of the edge, forever tell you goodbye, like how the river says it to the riverbank in a never-ending farewell. I would like to say goodbye to these present memories of morning, but I'm afraid they'll awaken and say goodbye to me. So looking at the poem, Abraham called out, one of the images, right? There's a chair. We know that there's a chair in this particular house. Además de una silla que existe en esta casa, también sabemos que hay un espejo verídico. ¿Qué más conocemos o sabemos de esta casa? What else are we aware of that exists within the world of this house, this tiny world? What does the poem tell us? We have a sense of place, right? We know that the house is near a river. We're told that it's near a river. It's also near a hill, ¿verdad? Porque tenemos aquí la niebla que sube a la colina, sube la colina. Un rebaño. There's a pasture also nearby. Does it sound like this house is in an urban environment? Or does it sound like it's somewhere off in the mountains? Yeah, right. It's rural. Exactly. There's a lot of nature nearby. What else is near the house or around the house? Hay un ciruelo, ¿no? Y en ese ciruelo hay pájaros, right? There's the tree, the plum tree. There's the river. There are people, or at least a woman or a girl. There's also a ghost of the edge. What do you think he means by fantasma de la orilla? I mean, he could mean a lot of things. Hasta podrá ser la llorona. We don't really know for sure, ¿verdad? So if we look at this entire poem y empezamos a preguntarnos, pues, ¿a dónde existirá este lugar? I mean, where could this potentially be? And does it really matter? I don't know if it matters the specific location, but the context of all of these things does matter because it's building for us a small world, right? He tells us in the very, very opening, es un mundo pequeño, un mundo verdadero, an only true world. He's very specific about that because this is the world. Yeah, it's Bakersfield. But he is very specific about this being a world, right? And it's a world that he has constructed using his language. Nos está construyendo una imagen en la mente que podemos asociar con esta nostalgia, ¿verdad? Que él siente. And I think if we talk about houses and the concept of a home, porque ya ven, es distinto, ¿verdad? ¿Cuál es la diferencia entre una casa y un hogar? If we had to really think about this, especially for ourselves, right? The poem is trying to communicate the sense of, I think, more than just a house. Communicate that this is a home that he is saying goodbye to. No es solo un adiós a la casa, es más bien un adiós al hogar. At least that's my opinion. And if we're going to go down that path, and if we're going to think about how we build things that we call our home versus the houses that we build, what are the things that differentiate them? So take a minute. As you can see here, this is technically a little worksheet, but give me 5 things that make up a house, or 3 if you get a little stuck. Pero ya puede ser en el chat o puede ser así um, en voz alta. Tell me, what is a house versus a home? River wrote in the chat, when we were displaced, home was wherever family was sleeping or anchored for the week. I would confuse people because I would say, let's go home, or so and so is at home. But the house that would refer to could change week to week or day by day. Yeah. San Juanita added windows, doors, floor, roof. Those make up a house. Yeah. River continued. So if we were split for the day, 3 different places might be referred to home, back home, or to home. San Juanita dice, home is where a family lives. Y ahora dice lo mismo, ¿dónde está tu familia? Me imagino un hogar, ¿verdad? So if that's how you would define a home, ¿dónde te quitas los zapatos? I mean, if you're the type of person that takes your shoes off, even like on the bus, maybe that's home. River adds, a house can be empty. A home is always full. I like that sentiment. Eso se me hace muy bonito. San Juanita writes, did you know that a man provides the house, but women makes it a home, typically? Yeah, I mean, if, in certain circles, that's probably true. Um, in a more traditional family and what would be considered a non-traditional family, it probably doesn't really make a difference. But but yeah, I mean, there's the sense of providing and then building a home, right? Tori added, house is shelter, rooms, something you purchase, and the home is a comfortable place, a garden, food, and all types of nourishment. Home is where Abraham keeps his PlayStation. Yeah. Y sí, la casa es algo físico y el hogar es abstracto. That's right. Ahora, específicamente, hay que ser mucho más específicos. ¿Cuál es la diferencia entre tu casa y tu hogar? This is, I think, where people sometimes get a little hung up. What is the difference between your house and your home? Especially if we follow the logic from earlier. And I do mean be specific, right? Give me some specific items or specific things that make up your house versus your home. Yeah. Yeah. A bed. Yeah. Where you feel at ease when sleeping. I like that. People safety, comfort in a Venn diagram. Yeah. That could be a way to describe a home for sure. Now, as part of this exercise, I hope that you're keeping track of the items or the things that you're listing as your house versus your home, because these are going to be things you're going to use later. The kids hate it when you say you're going home to Texas.
They say that's my home in California, not here.
Ah,
But I'm like, nope, my home is in Texas. They say home is where mom is. That's what they say.
ah. Pues ahí está. That's one of them, I guess, right? For
Yeah.
them,
Yep.
maybe home is where mom is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Abraham says, home is where you know where things are and go. Yeah, River likes that too. Home is where mom is. You know, in my lifetime, there's been several occasions where I've been uh housing insecure. I've almost been unhoused a couple of times, at least like twice. And the experience of going through that, right, where you're on the verge of losing your house, and you don't know whether or not you're going to be able to sleep in the same place, in the upcoming day or week. Those kinds of emotions very like the first time you experience them, they can be challenging, they can be very stressful. And I was lucky enough growing up that we had places where we could go, or we did have people that could take us in as a family. But I think for me, at least, if I were to say the things that are my house, it's going to be kind of like what Abraham said. My house is more the place where I store my stuff, but my home is going to be where I'm able to maintain a sense of safety and security. For me, my home is, here with my dogs. My home is where my dad is, where my mom is. They live in separate houses, but they're both home to me, right? Home is an abstract concept. But if I were to be specific, it would be centered around people. And of course, like I said, my dogs, who are like little people to me. But the idea is again, the sense of like home is where specific individuals are, right? Whereas my house is going to be the place where I store my things. My house I associate with where I keep clothing, where I keep food, there's different things that I associate with my house. It's also something, having lived that experience on multiple occasions where I learned to not have specific attachments to objects. Because for me, building a home was more about building my relationships. That's what was really important for me. So if I were to approach a poem like Octavio Paz's Adiós a la casa, para mí sería algo quizá muy diferente. Um, and I hope that all of you, are also thinking along that line of, what is it that you really purposefully call your home? Um, let's see. Let me keep up with the chat. And the chat river wrote, home is where you don't always have to be on. Have to be on, as in like you don't have to be someone else. I'm assuming that's what river means. Um, home is where you can be yourself without the fear of being judged, added San Juanita, because everyone at home shares the same craziness. Right? That's probably true. At least I know it is in my family. Um, so yeah, as Aurea said, el hogar es abstracto, pero no tiene que ser tan abstracto que no sabemos reconocerlo, ¿verdad? Porque como dije, para mí, en mi caso, el hogar yo tengo una asociación con específica gente, con gente que forma parte de mi familia. So that's, I think, very important. And if we look back even here at the poem, again, going back to the Octavio Paz, the house is, where sleep occurs. We can say that it's where sleep and dreaming occurs, ¿verdad? Es un lugar que tiene una silla, es un lugar a donde van los trajes, ¿verdad? Eso es lo que es la casa. Pero ya cuando vamos terminando el poema, ahí es a donde se invoca esta idea de la niña o la mujer, o hasta el fantasma. The girl, the woman, or the ghost of the edge, whatever that is meant for us to interpret. That's, I think, a point where we begin to really realize in this poem that the home is what he's now starting to say goodbye to, in this particular poem. It's not the house anymore, right? It's now the home, the people that he associates with that space. So I do believe that that's important for us to note in this particular poem. Yeah. ¿Hay alguna pregunta o algún otro comentario que quizá no han compartido? Well, what I would like you to do now is think about the objects that reside in your homes. All right. They serve many functions. Home is where your bills land. Yeah, that's probably true. So thinking now back to the objects and the things that you listed here as part of a house or your home, I'd like you to pick one and describe it. Now be conscious of the words you use to describe it. Sé preciso. Okay. Now, I gave some space here on the handout for you to write. If you obviously have downloaded it, you can do so. Um, pero para ustedes que están aquí en Zoom, también pueden ponerlo en el chat. Pero sí quiero que sean específicos, que sean lo más claro que pueden ser al describir cualquier objeto que tienen aquí como parte de su lista de casa versus hogar. Describe an object. All right, Abraham, describe your PlayStation for us.
I don't have one.
Mm, Solo hablabas.
Puro Nintendo.
¿De qué año? ¿Del original o del Super?
Puro Nintendo, pero de computadora.
Ah,
De los, ¿cómo se llama? Los que tienes en la computadora ya.
yeah, the emulators.
Ya, emulators.
Yeah.
Sí, son.
Keep in mind that in this exercise, you don't have to do complete sentences. That's okay. You can do just words that describe whatever the object is. But again, the more precise you can be, the better. Por ejemplo, si es un suéter que, I don't know, color rojo o color verde o multicolor, um, those are the kinds of things that I would like you to try and describe as best as you can.
So, excuse me, Luis, it's not about a home, right? It's
Uh,
about what's
this,
in the home.
yeah, this is an object that is in your home.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you.
Yeah, it might be easier to start with a single object, I figure, versus, the larger home.
Por ejemplo,
Mhm,
televisión.
mhm.
Like whatever's in the house, or even ventana, right?
Yeah,
Right?
ahora describe la ventana.
Okay.
Es de cristal claro, es de cristal opaco, es de multicolor. I mean, ¿qué es lo que se
Okay.
ve dentro de la ventana?
Oh, también que se ve fuera, ¿verdad? La que alcanzó a
También.
ver.
Ajá,
Okay, I got it. I got it.
yeah. Ya ven que en el poema de Octavio Paz, él nos dice que hay una ventana que tiene un poco de cielo y creo, si me acuerdo bien, deja averiguar. I don't want to just say without being correct. Um, yeah, the window uh, and the fog that blindly climbs the foothill, pasture that fades away. So aquí nos da a entender que en esta ventana se puede ver una neblina, una colina y un rebaño. So it's multiple things that we can see through the window. So it's not just the window. En el caso de Octavio Paz, hay un vestido de copos, hay un espejo, there's the couch, and he describes it as a rock in his insomnia, a crag that was neither split by lightning nor carved by water. So para mí eso me da a entender que este sillón no es un sillón blandito, es un sillón que quizás hasta esté hecho de madera o algo, I don't know, algo duro, ¿verdad? So again, take a moment, try and describe as precisely as you can one object. If you can do more objects, even better. And for those of you that are feeling like you've described it as best as you can, now the next step, assign to your object personal attributes, some human traits that characterize it. Si gustan seguirle con el ejercicio, quiero que al mismo objeto que han empezado a describir, quiero que le asignen atributos personales, unas características humanas que le den o por personalidad. And yes, for those of you that are picking up on it, this is personification. Para darles el ejemplo de la personificación que ocurre en el poema de Octavio Paz, vamos a regresar a la ventana, específicamente la neblina. Right? La neblina, la niebla, sube a ciegas la colina. So this is an example of what I'm asking you to do. Right? The fog that blindly climbs the foothill. Blindly is obviously a human characteristic, and climbing is also a human characteristic. So this is what I want you to do now. I want you to begin assigning human characteristics or some kind of personality trait to the object that you have selected. And if your stuff is constantly trying to trip you, then, maybe that human characteristic is a little more on the malevolent side. Like it crawls from the places they're supposed to be to lay traps in the walkways. Híjole. Then laugh like it's the most hilarious thing when I make it around. Your stuff sounds kind of devious, River. For sure. River added in the chat, legit, my CPAP just jumped out of my hands and onto the floor the other day with a happy splat. I like that the splat was happy. That's a really nice, precise, descriptive word. Good choice there, River. Me imagino que ya se están dando cuenta lo que va a ser su tarea. But just in case, I'm going to go ahead and give you the homework now. Su tarea esta semana es escribe un poema usando los detalles que has escrito anteriormente y reconstruye tu objeto elegido usando solo palabras precisas. Tomando inspiración del poema de Octavio Paz, dale un horario exacto al poema y dile adiós a tu objeto. Your homework this week is to write a poem using the details you previously wrote and reconstruct your chosen object using only precise words. Taking inspiration from Octavio Paz's poem, give the poem an exact time of day and say goodbye to your object. Excellent. I see some stuff here in the chat. Abraham wrote, curves dressed on light honey sunburst. Underneath old grain seduces the eyes, old and dusty hanging on the wall, waiting for one more song. Míralo, muy poético. San Juanita wrote, la ventana de cristal sucia por la última lluvia aquella tarde de invierno. Aurea wrote, my computer, silky and gray, contains all of the information I work on. It keeps it in its memory, hours of me wanting to go to sleep, but also the ones I don't want to because of the need to keep communication, not a specific someone, just communicating. Like that, Aurea. And River wrote, my stuff multiplies and yeets themselves without permission, like tribbles and ping pong balls. I'm not familiar with the tribble, but I really like the poetry of the simple words you're using there, River. San Juanita agregó, no dejaba de quejarse por estar cerrada. Al fin brincará de gusto al ser intercambiada. Very nice. I'll have to look up the tribble later. But thank you for the link, River. Muy bien. I think all of you have obviously gotten the hang of what we're doing here. So again, the purpose of today's exercise was to get you thinking about specificity, right? Si regresamos a la cita con que empezamos la sesión de hoy, you know, Eduardo Galeano, to me, in this particular little, we'll call it prose poem, he was really trying to just remind us that we have to be very mindful of the words we use, especially as poets, because if we overuse a word or we don't maybe use the precise word, we're going against whatever the meaning of it is. We're in some ways being traitors against our soul. Para mí eso es importante como autor, como poeta, sobre todo como poeta, because in poetry we have to be way more precise with the language that we use. So, I hope that as you think about the purpose of words and the purpose of your poetry, even, you really come back to this concept of being true to the word, be precise, and have fun, because in the end, that's where really the poetry exists, because we're world building. Con cada poema que vamos escribiendo, vamos construyendo un mundo pequeño, in the words of Octavio Paz. So enjoy that process, have fun with it, y sobre todo, sé preciso. Does anyone have any questions or any final comments? Or anything they would like to share that they have written so far?
I just want to say that I really like the lesson today. Very interesting and very inspiring. So thank you. I really appreciate it. It was actually a very interesting lesson.
Well, thank
So
you, Juanita.
thank you. Gracias.
Glad we didn't bore you. Thank you for the picture of the tribble, Abraham. Now I know what we're talking about. For the Star Trek Trekkies out there. Gracias, Aurea. I do hope that all of you have fun doing this week's exercise. La semana que entra, otra vez vamos a tener una sesión a donde vamos a dar notas sobre los trabajos que hacen esta semana. Again, we're going to continue on with the structure that we created for this particular series. So next week will be a workshopping session, and the week after will also be a workshopping session. So you can come, you can, share the work that you've created. If you didn't finish this week, your writing that you started, then you'll have another week, obviously, to continue working on it, and you'll have a chance to either share a revised version or your first version, whichever one comes first. So I do hope that you're finding those particular workshopping sessions useful for anyone that is watching afterwards on YouTube or even now on Instagram Live. You can learn more about our program by going to distillarts.org/Conchas y Café zine. If you want to have access to the handouts on that same website, you'll be able to register for the class through Google Classroom. ya estando allí registrado en Google Classroom, van a poder bajar no solo los folletos, sino también van a poder ver los videos junto con el mismo folleto. So that way you have a little bit of reference material there. Also, if you are now feeling ready to start submitting work for the current Conchas y Café zine, the one that is themed around the concept of rebuilding, you can do so now through our submittable page. Así que si ya están listos, empiecen a entregar sus trabajos y ojalá y salga en el próximo zine. And I believe with that, we'll go ahead and say goodnight. Uh, unless if anyone has any final questions.
El tema, ¿cuál es el tema esta vez, perdón?
Reconstruir.
Reconstruir.
Yeah, rebuilding.
And that's the one you're saying that we can submit already.
Mhm, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, el último
Thank you.
día para entregar sus trabajos esta vez va a ser el 10, no, perdón, el 13 de mayo. So the very last day of this particular workshop series is also the deadline for submitting work, which is
Okay.
the 13th of May.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you, Abraham. It's our pleasure, Eric. I hope you enjoyed tonight's class. And
You
yeah, gracias
well,
a
have a good
ustedes.
night.
Que se la pasen muy bien. We'll see you all
Mhm.
next week.
Hasta luego. Bye bye,
Hasta
everybody.
luego.